everyone to Textiles and Tea with the Handweavers Guild of America. I'm Kathy Group. I'm the Advertising and Marketing Manager for HGA, and I'm your host today. Today's program is sponsored by the Weavers Guild of St. Louis in memory of Lauren Blumenfeld. This is their way of honoring someone in their guild, and what a nice way to do this. We will have questions today, as always, in the last 15 minutes of the hour. Please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat. Love your comments in the chat, but I won't see the questions unless they're in the Q&A. Today, we have Char Norman. Now, Char is an accomplished weaver and artist, fiber artist, specializing in papermaking and fiber sculpture. She received a Master's of Fine Arts from Claremont Graduate University and a Bachelor of Art from Scripps College. She has lectured and exhibited extensively, both nationally and internationally. She has developed and conducted workshops for all ages, worked as a consultant to the area schools and community arts organization, and she's also served as a trustee for the Greater Columbus Art Council. Char held the positions of Associate Provost and Dean of Faculty at Columbus College of Art and Design. She has now returned to her studio as a full-time professional artist. Hello, Char, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's wonderful to have you here.
It's great, and I want to thank the Weavers Guild of St. Louis for sponsoring. That's wonderful.
First, I want to say welcome to everybody from the holidays. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Good. Our first question is very important, which is, what is your favorite tea?
Of course. Well, I grow a lot of herbs, so I like to make my own tea. Yes, I make it from lemon verbena and lavender, and I drink it fresh during the summer, but then I dry a lot of it so I can have it all year. So that's
industrious. That's good. I'm lazy. I just go to the store.
Well, I do that too. But
okay, good.
This is my favorite.
Can you share with us how you got started in fiber?
You know, I think fiber is part of my DNA. I really do, because when I can remember as a little girl, my mother did a lot of sewing. She made most of our clothes, and she always had scraps, and I would play with them. And she'd let me, you know, just sew things together and do things in different ways. And my grandmother was a knitter, so she always had yarns around. And I remember as a little girl having this table in my bedroom that was just covered with scraps of things. And I would put them together in interesting ways. I'd make just little funny sculptures, or I'd try to make clothes for my dolls. And it just kind of bloomed from there. And then in high school, I took a course in one of my art classes, introduced me to weaving. And it was just a little cardboard loom, but I was hooked immediately. I loved it. And just weaving in all kinds of things as the weft, you know, straw and bits of fur. And I can remember embellishing it with turkey bones. And, you know, I loved it.
And that was in high school?
I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I went on to college, there were actually courses in weaving and rooms full of looms, and I was in heaven. So.
Well, your work seems to focus on the relationship between man and nature. So where did that love of nature come from for you?
So that, again, as a child, I hiked all the time. Our family vacations were always camping. And I think that's probably because we couldn't afford anything else, who knows, but always out in the wilderness. My grandfather would take my older brother and I hiking on this stream every Saturday, and we'd just get to fool around, do whatever we wanted, you know, and we'd put sticks together and do things and climb trees. And as an adult, I took my children hiking all the time and camping. And, you know, I grew up in California, so I, you know, was familiar with the redwood trees and the forests there, and then went to Southern California, fell in love with the beaches. But then when I came to Ohio, oh my gosh, the hardwood forest, I couldn't believe it. So even today, I hike almost every day. Yeah, I love being out in the woods.
Well, you did a residency in Florence. I'm incredibly jealous. How did you, Florence, Italy, by the way, I should
Yes.
say the whole thing. How did that change? How do you think that changed your artwork, your approach to your artwork? And then if that's one question. The other question is, can you talk some about how you got a residency? People are always asking how that happens.
Okay. Well, let me first talk about what it did to my work. I mean, it profoundly changed my work
Really?
because in my studio, I have, lots of looms. I have all my paper making equipment. I mean, you can see behind me, I've got all these fibers that I work with. But when I went to Italy, I had none of that. I had made a little bit of paper that I took with me. I had wound some bobbins of some linen thread and some needles, and that was it. I had this apartment, which was great, right in the middle of historic Florence, but my studio was half of my dining room table. So, really, I was on the streets of Florence all the time. And in Italy, there are these tabernacles on the corners of buildings, which are shrines, basically, to Catholicism. And I really liked them. I thought, well, what if I were to do a shrine? What would it be? And I said, well, of course, it would be about nature. So I started making these little objects with just found sticks and stones and the bit of paper and fiber I had brought with me. The one you're looking at is also colored pencil. I had brought my colored pencil so I could do some drawing. And I started finding niches that I would put these in and photograph them. And then most of them I just left behind. So I have no idea what happened to them. But the thing is, it really got me out of thinking I had to have all this fancy equipment. I had to have a big space, and I didn't. So, it really changed what I was doing and the way I was thinking about my artwork and where I showed it, and the fact that I wanted other people to enjoy it, even if I never saw it again. So that was cool.
So how big was that? I'm sorry.
That one was probably about 6 inches. They're very small. They're very small. They had to fit into these niches. And, it's funny because I put them places I wasn't allowed, like on the doors of a cathedral or things like that. And, sometimes they'd last, other times they'd disappear. But I did a show of the photography there in Florence. So I showed these works that I then printed out on handmade paper. And I was kind of embarrassed, do these people think I'm a guerrilla artist? Am I littering? And they were just like, oh, we love it. Do more. We want to go find them, so they embraced it. But the way I got that particular residency was because I handled all the international education at the college I was working for. And I would go to Florence for meetings twice a year. I mean, somebody had to go, so I volunteered. But and then they offered me a residency, the school there that I was working with, and said, come, for a month or two and live here and make your work. And we just asked that you do a lecture for the students. But I've done a number of other residencies too, and they're all different. You apply for some you're invited to. There's great resources online to find residencies, and I absolutely recommend them for everybody. Even if you have a nice studio and everything at home, just getting out of your normal life changes your work. So I embrace them. I think they're great.
Well, I have to go back to you left them there. Now, I am no professional artist, but I have to say my work is pretty precious to me. I don't know that I could just leave it. What was that like? I mean, did you think about the whole meaning of just leaving it? Or
I did, and it was hard at first. It was very hard. But, I like surprises. And I always thought about, what if somebody was walking down the street and found one of these? What would they think? That would be really cool. Of course, I don't know what they're going to think. I thought about hiding behind a post or something and watching or tagging it somehow so they could find me. But I was traveling with a friend of mine, and she was a photographer and helped me do the photos of them. And she really encouraged me. She said, you could do this, just leave it. walk away, walk away. And the funny part is her sister was there too. And her sister was following us and wanted to pick them up and take them home. So we had to hide from her sister. But no, it was difficult. But I like that element of surprise and just not letting it go, not knowing what happens. And then, I had the documentation, so I still have a part of it.
Oh, I would have loved it. I just think that would have been a thrill of.
Yeah. Well, since then I've done that everywhere I do a residency. I leave pieces in a tree or somewhere, for people to find. And it amuses me.
It's also very giving. I mean, that's a lot of giving on your part of, here's my work and I'm going to put it out there for you.
It's kind of my philosophy too. I'm taking from nature. I need to give back to nature. So I like that.
That's a great idea. Huh. Well, you combine the weaving and your pieces from nature, and I'm always curious how you do that. I mean, which comes first to you? Do you say, "Oh, I love this rock or this wood, and I'm going to put a weaving around it," or do you say, "I'm going to do this weaving, and I'll find something that goes with it"? So, how's that work for you?
Well, it works both ways.
Oh, okay.
It really does. As I said, I walk in the woods every day. I'm always finding things, and I pick things up and say, what could I do with this? Or this is really beautiful, and I'll have an idea how to combine something with it. Or I'll bring it to my studio and it sits for a year or two just because I love it. Other times I have an idea, I start with the concept and maybe do the weaving. My work has these woven pods in them. And then I'll go out and find something that fits, especially the things that I'm putting inside of them, because often I'll put seed pods or things like that, and I'll have to go find just the right thing. But it works both ways. I'm always finding things, always getting ideas. No shortage.
Well, this leads me into my next question, which is, these three works are called rock books. And many people, me included, are drawn to being able to open something up. And what is it about that? You just love opening it. It comes from childhood, I think. And that's what's wonderful about these, is that you open them up and then there's something wonderful inside. So,
well, I agree with you. Opening things is just something we love to do. And again, that harks back to surprises. I like surprises. But the rocks themselves, this is from really from all the beach combing I did when I was in San Diego, not just when I lived there, but I used to go back, several times a year because my family was there. And I'd always pick up rocks. And then I started picking up rocks from everywhere I go. And I love rocks because of the way they feel in your hands. They're strong and they have these wonderful shapes, and you can clack them together and they make a great noise. And then I started thinking about rocks. I'm moving rocks from the West Coast to the East. Those rocks have been there for, millennia. What could those rocks tell us if they could tell us a story? They've been witness to history. So I thought, well, maybe a rock book. Maybe that rock could open up and reveal its secrets and its memories. So that's how I started making the books. And it's cast paper, and it really is as hard as a rock. And then with the coiled edges, but then all the drawing inside is either about the rock itself becoming gravel as it breaks down, or the one before was dates from my family, significant dates written in pre-Columbian writing. And then the other one was a river. I was thinking rocks sit in rivers or in streams and the water flows through, and I wanted to really kind of keep that idea. But just the idea of rocks, I love them. They're great. I've always traveled and brought them back in my suitcases and in my pockets, and, makes TSA crazy, when I can't do the x-ray. And why do you have rocks in your pocket? And I have to explain myself.
So whatever's inside you've drawn too, correct?
Yes, I do the drawing. I used to do a lot of drawing, either with colored pencil or pastels. And I
It's not-
draw, I'm sorry, I draw in my sketchbook all the time too. I draw out ideas. It never turns out what I plan because it changes as you go, but I like to draw.
So is there, it sounds like there's a connection somehow with what's inside and where you start. Do you start first and say, I want something around it?
No, I think with the rock books, it's really more what's inside first.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, what I want to portray, and then I cast the rock and fit it all together.
Well, I
Yeah.
feel kind of silly because I thought that rock was a rock. I didn't realize it was paper.
It's paper, yeah, and it
Nice job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, most people think that they're real rocks, and they are not. They're paper, which is very funny because you could pick it up and throw it at somebody, and they're going to duck, thinking it's real.
Well, nothing gets past me. Nothing. Your work is a combination of opposites. You have the very soft weaving in the paper
Mhm.
with the hardness of a real rock or a stick or wood or whatever. And then some of your images are like a shroud, but could also be seen as a womb.
Mhm.
And then you also talk about nurturing nature and nurturing acts, but then you also discuss the destruction of nature.
Mhm.
And we have an example here. This is petroglyphs and Gaia's womb. So could you talk some about the opposites, but also about these pieces?
Sure, sure. Well, I really like that dichotomy of ideas. And I think that's always been a part of my work because I like to find a balance somehow. And, I could do beautiful little things of lovely nature, but it doesn't address the fact that our environment's in trouble. So I want both of those things. The pod shapes that I weave, and you see this in Gaia's womb, that red part is all woven. I've always thought of those as being a womb. It's really, you can see it as a very sexual thing, but it's also a shroud because I'm always often putting dead things inside of it. I use a lot of dead leaves and dead pieces of bark so it's a shroud, but it sometimes has seeds in it, so it's rebirth. So you have that. I think of the methods I use as opposites too, because I'm building something, but often I'm taking a sharp needle and I'm stabbing it through, these pieces of nature, so that's kind of violent. But mending is kind of violent, because you're stabbing something, So I see that. The hard surfaces, I like that contrast with the soft surfaces. I just think that's a nice, interesting way to do it. And by the way, in Gaia's womb here, the lacy part is kozo, which is a fiber used in paper making. And it looks very delicate, but it is so strong. So there again, you have that. It looks like it's delicate, but it's strong. It looks like that's a real rock in petroglyphs. It's not, it's cast paper. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I just like opposites because I feel like those opposites create a balance. And it also engenders a conversation,
Well, I just love it because it's easy to be black, white, like kind of an opposite, but I like it that the same thing can be so different depending on how you look at it. So I think that's amazing.
And I think art's like that, the viewer is going to bring their own experience to it. So it might not be what I intended. And that's fine. That's great. I learned from that too.
Well, in your exhibit, Listen to the Earth, there was an introduction, and the exhibit was at the McConnell Art Center. Where is that?
That's in Worthington, Ohio, which is right next to Columbus.
Okay.
Yeah.
And there was a term used called eco psychology. Now, I've never heard of this. So would you explain a little bit of what you mean by this term?
Okay. Well, eco psychology is a relatively new field, maybe 20, 30 years old. And it's the melding of psychology with ecology, but it's the study of how humans interact with nature and how nature affects humans, whether it's your physical health or your mental health, but really that marriage of the two. And, you hear now about forest bathing and things like that, going out into nature and how it can be calming to you and affect your mental state. Well, that's eco-psychology, how that happens. And as I said, it's a very new field, but I think very popular anymore. So that's what I meant by that.
Was that something that you not necessarily taught, but maybe talked about while you were teaching?
I didn't so much. Really, it was just a lot of books I read about it because, it fits right in with my work. So to discover there's actually a field here, that was really pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but your work is so full of symbolism. It's just lovely. It's kind of like to me, it's like a puzzle of trying to figure out what it means for me and for you. But do you ever work just to make something visual, just to make, or is there always a meaning for you?
Not always. Sometimes I make just to make, but because I like working with my hands. I am a maker and I like creating things. And sometimes I just make for the act of making. I mean, doesn't have to be a sculpture necessarily, but I will admit, and this is hard to admit, sometimes I'll make something and then I come up with the art wrap later. This is what it means. I didn't know this, but this is what it means. And, I think that's a dirty little secret of a lot of artists, that we come up with our concept after the piece is done, because you have to have a statement, you have to say what it means. And so we come up, but mostly I have a concept while I'm making. It changes considerably. Titles change, things develop and grow or not. Or they're not successful and they go away. But mostly I have a concept and then work, but I do, sometimes I just sit down at a loom and weave for the joy of weaving, and make a scarf or make a placemat, or, I did a lot of that when I was teaching weaving, and it was wonderful because I did all these samples to show my students. And that was just for the joy of sitting at a loom. Or I love pulling pieces of paper. Making paper is a wonderful activity, and it feels good. And I may never use those sheets of paper, but I like making them. Yeah.
Well, I know that sometimes I find that once I get into whatever I'm making, that it isn't till the end that I actually do think of, oh, that's what this means to me.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And all the coiling that I do on the edges of my sculptures, that's where I do a lot of thinking, because coiling is very meditative. It's very boring and it's very meditative, but and I spend hours and hours doing that. So that's a lot of where I come up with my writing and my concepts and, things like that.
Well, when you talk about meditative / boring, when you work, do you want to be focused, or can you listen to a book or have the TV on?
It depends on what I'm doing. If I am figuring out how to assemble a sculpture, I need to concentrate on it. If I'm doing the weaving part on the loom or the coiling on the edges that I finish it with, I always listen to music, or I'm doing something. The coiling I do in the car a lot. My husband and I travel cross country all the time. We drive back and forth to San Diego, which is a 4-day trip.
No kidding.
No kidding. He drives and I coil.
Oh, that's great.
I have a funny story about that too. We were doing a lecture for students, and somebody asked me, well, how long does it take you to coil one of those little pods? And my husband pops up, oh, about 3 states.
I like that. I like that.
I know.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, I can appreciate that. We just went to Florida this past weekend, and I arranged the seats in my van so that I could weave on my table loom Well,
Perfect.
my husband was driving because he wants to drive. I get tired of sitting there.
Yeah,
I have my little table and
that's exactly the way we do it. That's
I
great. I
know.
never thought of bringing a loom.
And I had visions of getting pulled over by the police and he'd be like, what are you doing back there? Well, I read that you see your work, and I may have this wrong, that you see your work as very sustainable. And some of the characteristics that you see in that is that your work endures over time,
Mhm.
that it engages the viewer, and it's that the materials that you use are actually sustainable.
Mhm.
So was this a planned thing, or is this something that just came to you over time?
It kind of came to me over time. And a lot of that, when I was working with students, especially grad students and college students, we always required them to do a statement, but also a manifesto. What do you believe in? And so I had to really question myself, what is it I believe in? And, I do believe in sustainability, and that doesn't just mean the materials are sustainable or environmentally friendly. It means the work itself will endure. It will still be interesting 100 years from now. That it's aesthetically pleasing, that's important to me. And craftsmanship is really important. But the other thing is engaging the viewer. I like art that engages me. Now, it might be something that's beautiful, and I love it because of its beauty and its intricacy or its craftsmanship. But it also could be something that's kind of horrendous or ugly, but makes me think about things. So that would be engaging. So I started thinking about that in my own work, and those are things that I really believe in, and I want my work to be that. So that's where that all comes from.
These next works, The Broken Plains and The Distress of Nature, these works were example of your collage work. And this is handmade paper, correct?
Yes.
And I would think that this art form is so different from your sculptures and the work you do with the rocks. So what is the connection between the two?
Well, it is and it isn't. Okay. When I was in college, I majored in fibers, but I minored in printmaking. So I've always done 3D work and 2D work at the same time and trying to get those two together. But these particular collages and all the collages I've done since are an outgrowth of those pieces that I did in Italy.
Yeah, I can tell.
Yeah, I came back with all of these photos of niches and tabernacles, printed them out on handmade paper. And then because they weren't real, I couldn't put anything in. So I started inserting these leaves. The leaves are real leaves. I sew them in very carefully.
Really?
Yes, they are real leaves. But I see this as an outgrowth of those sculptures that I actually did there and left there. Because when I came home, I wanted to continue the series, but I didn't have the actual thing. So I had to improvise. So I was again sewing nature into these niches and making them kind of sacred to me. So that's the connection there. And then the handmade paper, as I said, I always make paper, and I like sewing it all together. I always have to have fiber in my work somewhere because I love fiber. So sewing it all together worked well for me. So that, I hope, answers your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love how you think outside the box.
Yeah.
Or maybe my box is very small. I don't think very wide.
Oh, I think these are
I'm
pretty
like,
unusual.
oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that, I love that.
Yeah. And some of those I was doing a residency in New York, and I did the same type of thing, but I sewed in maps, historical maps of Manhattan, and then sewed nature into those maps, So they're the same kind of collages, but really had to do with New York.
Well, we're going to take questions in a minute, but as they're popping up, I can see them. And one of the things, people are talking about is how interesting and inspiring your work is. And who inspired you? Who was your inspiration as you were starting out, or even now, I guess?
So many inspirations. I had an amazing faculty advisor when I was in my undergraduate work.
Oh, that's always great.
Yeah, Nada Al-Hulali, who is an amazing fiber sculptor. And she encouraged me so much to think out of the box. She absolutely insisted on craftsmanship. So that was wonderful. I had another faculty member who he knew I loved fiber, and he challenged me to do something with fiber that's structurally sound and hard. And that, I think that's where that comes from. So I did sculptures that were using wire and, rebar and things like that with fiber. So that encouraged me. But then there's always the famous artist, Magdalena Abakanowicz. I can't get enough of her, Lenore Tawney. And I look at painters a lot too, like Bonnard, to get color schemes. And when I was in academia, students, they always inspired me. And other faculty members inspired me. Yeah. So you learn so much. I always told my students, I learn as much from you as you're learning from me. So that's cool. But yeah, there's just so many influences. I can even say I had the support of my family, for a while, my mother said, go be a chemist. And I said, no, I'm rebelling. I gotta be an artist. But, my husband's an artist too. So,
Oh, he is.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
yeah. He's a painter.
that must be such a nice support of somebody.
Yeah, it is. And, I know other artists who don't have that support. I do. Yeah.
Well, one of the other things I was curious about, and you've talked some about this already, is that your work has a lot of problem solving in it.
Yes, it does.
So like when you're working, do you start thinking, okay, how am I going to hang this? How do I incorporate pieces into it? Do I want to weave? Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? Or do you just solve those issues when you get to them? Well, I guess this is like a design question. How do you design?
Yeah. It's really kind of a combination. There is so much problem solving. I mean, like this one we're looking at, I knew I wanted to address the Southwest and the materials that I had gathered there, the wood and the rocks and this lacy stuff is actually what I call cactus skeletons. It's the inside of a cactus after the leafy part rots away. And I wanted to put something together that really addressed what I loved there and the colors. And so I wove the pods first. I knew I wanted to fit this wood in, but how to do it. So I kind of have to manipulate it and work with it and find the right kind of wood or the right piece of wood. How do I get that cactus to stay in there? So much engineering. And then the coiling around the edges of those pods look like it's just straight coiling, but it's not. That's structural as well. And I have to make a loop where I want it to hook into the wood. And then I got this all done and I didn't like the inside of the pod. So I had to figure out how to do that. So I have sand in there. I spread some glue on the weaving and then just sprinkled sand. And I thought that's going to do it. And then I had to decide, is this going to sit on a pedestal or is this going to hang on the wall? Mm-hmm. So really manipulating it, looking at different ways. It did end up as a wall piece, and then how to hang it. There's all of that. But yeah, there's so much problem solving, but I do it as I go. And a lot of it doesn't work. And I have to step back and think, what could work? I often laugh that I have to be an engineer and or I'll have to go get help because I don't always understand the balance of things. But yeah, I work it through. And as I said, I start with sketches sometimes, but it never ends up that way. Because I change so much as I go and, part of it from necessity, part of it's problem solving. But yeah, there's a lot. That's the part I enjoy too. I love that.
I was going to say, you have more patience than I do. I get aggravated if I can't get the threads through the, heddle. So
No,
it's like,
I'm not saying I don't get aggravated because I do.
oh, okay. So what's next for you? What's down the road?
Well, there's a lot of things coming down the road here. I had the opportunity a while back to go to Ecuador and trek the Amazon. Yeah, a friend of mine, we canoed the Amazon River and we worked with indigenous tribes there, figuring out what they needed from us. And so we've actually already created a body of work that addresses the Amazon rainforest and the destruction of that forest. So I'm in the middle of creating more work for that, and I have a couple shows scheduled. I'm also collaborating with a former student who's a glass artist. So I'm now doing fiber and glass, which I think is going to be fun. There's no shortage of ideas, and I always work on about 7 to 10 sculptures at a time. I can't just do one thing. So I'll get an idea and I have to go start it. But I think the Amazon body of work is going to consume me for another year, and this glass work will be just as consuming. So that's on the docket.
Well, you talk about traveling. Have you traveled a lot, and does it influence your work?
It influences it tremendously. Well, I traveled a lot before COVID.
Yeah, didn't we all?
I haven't traveled since, but I'll start again. But yeah, I've done trips to, as I said, we drive cross country a lot. I've gone to the Pacific Northwest. I've traveled all over the Southwest. I've traveled to China and back several times. Throughout Europe. A lot of that was because of my job. I was dean of faculty at an art college. And so I would set up programming, and while I was there, I'd do my own work. So
what a great opportunity. Oh
yeah,
my
it was
gosh.
wonderful. It was wonderful. And since retiring from there, now I do residencies and go different places. And everywhere I go, I try to do a piece or something that has been influenced by it. So yeah, it's a huge influence on my work. And I gather materials everywhere.
Well, let's start answering some of our questions. How's that?
That sounds good.
Now, some of these we may have to figure out what they're referring back to, because they've asked them and then we've moved on. It says, this is from Ramona Abernathy Payne. What are the woven pods that Char speaks of in our work? Now, you may have answered that, because that was an early on question. Like that last piece, right? Those are the kind of woven pods you were referring
to. Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
call them pods. The original impetus for that was milkweed pods, because I love their shape. But they're woven on the loom. They start on the loom, and I do a lot of shaping on the loom, then further shape it off the loom. And I call them pods. Some people say, oh, they look like boats or canoes, and that's fine too. But that's what I'm referring to. And they're most of my weaving is linen, because it's so strong and gives me a good structure and wonderful colors. And I hope that answers the question.
Nan Holberg says, it looks like some of your rocks have holes drilled in. Is that true? Do you have to do that? Would you have to drill into the rock to connect it? And are you particular about the rock? Is it just mainly appearance, or?
I'm very particular about the rock. First of all, the holes that you see in any of my rocks are natural. I find them.
Okay.
And I choose just the right color, shape, and it has to go with the work too. If I'm doing a piece that speaks of the desert in Arizona, it has to be a rock from there. If I'm talking about something from the tide pools in San Diego, it has to be a rock from there. So it has to relate to the piece, but also the color and shape and size has to relate to what I want the sculpture to be.
Okay. This is also from Ramona Abernathy Payne. She goes, how are the pods woven? Is that something you do on the loom?
Yeah, I do that on the loom. And what I do is I put spacers in on the edges, and then the spacers come out when I'm take it off the loom, and I pull the warp up. So the warp kind of crunches together and starts to form. And then I further form it with the coiling I do on the outside. But yeah, all the pods are done on the loom. Everything starts on the loom.
Huh. Now, do you teach this? Do you teach people how to make pods?
Occasionally I do. I do some workshops occasionally, once I retired from academia, it's like, I don't want to teach anymore, but I was basically admin though, I didn't do a lot of teaching, but I taught weaving for years and years and years in my studio and at a center. And now I'm just kind of thinking, well, I'll do a workshop here and there. And I do, in fact, next time I go back to Ecuador to this tribe, they want me to do a workshop. So we'll do it with natural plants there. But I've done a few.
Oh, how great.
Yeah.
Okay, Brenda Brock says, is the top of the rock in the petroglyphs colored with pencil or paint? I meant to ask you about that because it almost looked like an echo print thing.
I know, but it's not. It's colored pulp.
Pulp?
So the paper pulp. I actually put dye into the paper pulp, and there's special dyes you can use for that, but you can use natural dyes in paper as well. So I kind of arrange the pulp I use a plaster cast. What I do is make a plaster mold of the rock itself, and then I use that plaster to cast the pulp. So I arranged the pulp in there, different colors. When I took it out, I did enhance it a little bit with pencil, colored pencil.
Whitney, can you find the petroglyph? I can't say.
Petroglyph.
Petroglyph again, and pull that back up. We'll see if she can find it again. Let's see.
There it is.
She's a hero. You're my hero. So the one on the left, that is the pulp.
Yes. So I had gray pulp and kind of that melon pinkish pulp and the natural pulp, and I just mushed them together the way I wanted it to be in the mold. Now I was looking at a rock. I look at a real rock to do this, to make it look like that. Some of my rocks, have little speckles in them, or the real rock did. So I'd put coffee grounds into my pulp and get those speckles, or whatever it took. But this particular one was all colored pulp, and then I did go back in with a pencil and enhance some of the shapes a little bit.
Now, is this your paperwork especially, but a lot of this, did you learn this in school, or you just learned by exploring and trying this and trying that?
Well, I didn't learn paper making in school because they didn't have it. But as I said, I was a printmaking minor. So I was working with paper, I was trying to sew on my paper, which commercial paper doesn't work well for that. So I decided I had to make my own paper. When I got out of school, I just took a few workshops, read a lot of books, experimented a lot, eventually ended up teaching paper making. But yeah, you can learn a lot just from watching other people and, little few workshops here and there. And but yeah, it really came after college, after grad school.
What is your preferred, this is from Nan Hallberg. What is the preferred fibers for weaving, and what size? Or
I use a 16-2 linen. Almost exclusively. Sometimes I throw in some novelty fibers, but pretty much always that linen.
Is that what's behind you?
Yeah, this is all my linen, tons of it here. But there's cottons and things that I'll throw in, and always natural materials. I will not use acrylics. I don't like them. And I don't use wool much anymore either. So it's always cotton, but mostly linen. Yeah.
Well,
and paper. I didn't talk about that. I spin paper sometimes and use that. And
You
we
spin paper?
Yeah, it's called kimihoto, and when you weave it, it's called shifu, which is a Japanese technique. So that too.
Is there anything you don't do?
Not for the life of me, arrange flowers.
Okay. Where Mary Holm and Joyce Robards have kind of a similar question. And I thought this too. I wondered about this too. When you sew the leaves, are they pretty, what keeps them from crumbling and tearing up?
Well, luck. No. Sometimes I do. I experimented with a lot. At first, I would only choose leaves that were pretty substantial, but then I started coating them with an acrylic medium and that worked. But now I wax them and that's the best. So I just use the same kind of wax you use in caustic. And so a light coating of wax, and that holds it together. And it's really, really quite wonderful.
Does it keep the color too?
It does.
Huh.
The leaves are pressed and dried before I do this. So,
wow.
Yeah.
This is from Kathy Roy. Hi, Kathy. She says, hi, Char.
Hi, Kathy.
Even though we met not long after I moved back to Columbus via my cousin Molly, I know even more about you and your work. Your concepts are wonderful. Thank you for sharing, and I'm inspired. So shout out to you from Kathy.
Kathy, we just met, and it's wonderful to have another weaver in town, and it's great.
Oh, she's in Columbus.
She's in Columbus now.
Oh, I didn't realize that. North Carolina's lost. A lot of these are repeats. Oh, does Char, this is from Sue, sorry. Hi, Sue. Does Char embrace color from nature? Does she create natural dye in her work?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I try to match my color to whatever natural object I'm using, but sometimes I'll make it brighter or something so that it's a little pop of color. Most of my weaving that I do is commercially dyed linen, but recently I've been kind of playing with natural dyes, and I used to do natural dyes years ago, so I'm just kind of getting back into it.
Of course you did.
And I garden a lot. I grow so much, so I'm kind of switching my vegetables over to natural dye stuffs and playing with that. And I like it because I can not only dye the yarn and whatever it is, but I can dye my paper pulp at the same time. So it's pretty cool. So yes, I'm getting into it again, but you're going to laugh when I say this. I can't do everything.
But by gosh, you're going to try, right?
I got to try.
Oh, this is an interesting question. This is from Sharon Costello. Was your trip to Ecuador sponsored by an organization, or did you go on your own?
That's a good question. There is, and actually I'm on their board. It's a group of women, and we work with we're called Silva Vincent Frontieras, which means the Amazon without borders. And we work with a place in Ecuador outside of Quito called the Amazon Reserve for Peace. And our president of our board is the sister of the owner of this reserve. So we just got a group of people together. I think there were about 11 or 12 of us that went, and it was all organized. We had a guide there, and here's the great thing. We're going again, and we're inviting people to come. So,
well, how can people find out about it? Is it on your website?
No, but I'll put it there.
Okay,
I will put it on my website. It's also, I'll put it on my Instagram account. But yeah, we have a website.
Type it into the chat, but I have no idea what you just said.
Silva Vida Sin Fronteras, and I'm not pronouncing it right because I don't know Spanish.
There you go. That's all right. So folks, go to her website and you will see it if you want to go with her to Ecuador. And who would not? I just want to follow you around and watch your mind work. Oh, what, I think this is what Nan is asking, the largest size paper that you made?
The largest size paper, like the collages that I made.
She says largest size made of paper. Yeah,
Prob-
so your collages are when you make paper, what's the biggest sheet? Both of those. Because I'm curious about. how
Yeah,
large a sheet
I
you make.
usually work fairly small, but I've made sheets up to about probably 30 by 40 inches, maybe. My largest collages are that paper.
Mhm.
And I don't have facilities for that, so I have to go somewhere. I either go up to Cleveland to the Morgan Conservatory, or I have a very dear friend in Virginia who has a beautiful paper studio, and I go there and make huge sheets of paper. But I prefer to work small. And a lot of my stuff doesn't translate larger.
Well, here's somebody else from Columbus. Madeline Dickerson. She said, have you ever used peeling birch from the paper birch tree?
I have.
She said, any suggestions on how it can be used?
Well, I sewed it down into some collages, but I've seen vessels made with it. You have to wet it and so that you can shape it, and it's beautiful stuff. And actually I just thought about this. Some of the work that my friend and I, whose name, by the way, is Helen Hoffelt, give a shout out to her, that we did for this show about the Amazon. She's a photographer, and she printed on bark. So she she printed images, and then we sewed that into our collages. Yeah.
Oh,
I
that's
don't
cool.
exactly know how she did it, because that's her thing.
Well, Ellen Turner. Hi, Ellen. Ellen's another one who does tons. She gets more done in a day, kind of thing. Do you use the linen for coiling?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. I love it for coiling.
And let's see. Do you use stiffeners? This is from Andrea Tyson. Do you use stiffeners on your work for your shapes?
It doesn't need stiffeners. It's very strong, but occasionally I will paint the inside of the weaving with an acrylic medium, and that will stiffen it. But it really doesn't require that. I do use the same acrylic medium on my wood and the bark because I have to protect it. So sometimes when I'm doing that, I just paint the weaving too, but only the inside because it changes the character of the fiber.
Mm. Well, this is a great question. I hadn't even thought of this. This is from Gail Troy. Have you studied geology?
I haven't, but I should.
Well, come on, you slacker.
I know. Well, right now I'm into fungi, so I'm studying fungi,
Are you going to dye with it? Dye with a fungi, or?
No, I'm going to make sculptures that refer to fungi.
Okay. All right.
I could, I don't want to collect it though. I just like to go out and find it and read about it and read about the whole fungal network that keeps our trees talking to each other. And that fascinates me.
You have a very curious mind, don't you?
I do.
You do.
But what I was going to say about geology is, I get on a kick and then I go to the library and I just read and go online and look at things. And then I'm on to something else,
Okay, we asked that. Somebody's asking if you could describe how to make paper, but I don't think we have enough time for that.
Yeah. Well, basically you take plants and mush them up and put them on a screen, and that's your paper. There are wonderful books out there on paper making.
Oh, this is from Sharon Costello. When she was in Ecuador, Ecuadorian Amazon, the indigenous people were carving wonderful animal imagery on large gourds. Did you come across those? And what natural materials did you find for your work there?
I did not come across those. That sounds really interesting. It does. We were in areas where there's a lot of banana fiber, yucca, which is different from yucca. We came across tagua seeds, and I I got some after I came home. And that's vegetable ivory, and I have sculptures all about that. And I really didn't bring anything back with me because I didn't think I could. But now I
Oh,
realize I could have. I could have snuck it in.
not now.
Not now, I know.
You're busted now.
I know. But when I was there, I tried doing some weaving with banana, and they weave mats and roofs and all kinds of stuff with banana fiber. So that was very cool to see. We were in an area where the Kofans and the Siona live, and they make a lot of things out of bamboo, jewelry, and as I said, mats and roofs and that sort of thing. So that's what I came across. Yeah.
Well, I cannot believe it. I say this every time, but this has been so much fun. You are such an inspiration, I just want to go find things now. I'm going to learn things. So thank you so much for being here today. I do appreciate it.
This has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
I hope you'll come back and we can hear about what your next adventure is going to be.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. Can people contact you through your website or?
They can, yes.
Okay. So there's plenty more questions, and maybe y'all can just contact her directly, especially about the paper making. I'm sure she'll direct you where you should go and get that information. If you want more information, be sure you go to Char's website. It's charnorman.com, and it's a beautiful website. There's all kinds of interesting things. I mean, Char's interesting, so it reflects her. It's very interesting. Again, we want to thank our sponsors, the Weavers Guild of St. Louis, in memory of Laura Blumenfeld. And I just can't say enough how wonderful this is that the guild has introduced us to Laura Blumenfeld through this, and she lives on. It's a lovely gesture from the guild. Thank you so much. If you would like to sponsor an episode of Textiles and Tea, or your guild or your business, please go to our website, weavespindye.org, and you can get all the information you need, or you can just contact us here, and we will work with you to get that sponsor set up. I want to thank also the Fiber Trust. If you aren't aware, today is Giving Tuesday. If you have internet, you will know today is Giving Tuesday. And first of all, I want to thank all the people who have donated to HGA, especially over the last 2 years. It's just been so difficult for everyone. And we really do appreciate those of you who were able to donate to keep us afloat because we had to postpone Convergence. We'll have it this summer. But even though it was a tough time, the good thing is that some wonderful things came out of that. And we all started thinking a little bit differently. This program was one of them. We started thinking, what can we do to keep people connected and online? And this was another one. Spinning and Weaving Week. We've got more programs coming up this spring about how guilds function, how they can function better, information for guilds. So thank you all who have donated to the Fiber Trust. If you are thinking about how you would like to participate in this global day of giving, I love this, consider donating to HGA and the Fiber Trust. All that information, again, is on weavespindye.org. If you missed any of the episodes, or you want to watch today's again, which I can understand why you would, go to the HGA Facebook page. You do not have to have an account to watch it online. And all the episodes are on there. You can go back and watch them again, share them with a friend. So check that out. Next week, we have the queen of double weave. Jennifer Moore is going to be here and talk about her work, her creativity, and we're very excited to have her there. Thank you for joining us today. This was a fun evening or afternoon. Thank you again, Char. We do appreciate you coming in today. And I hope you have a great week. Happy tea.